How times have changed. Back in the day, a plastic bowling ball was the norm for bowlers everywhere, but urethane and reactive balls took the game to new levels, and plastic balls were demoted to the job of making spares, although still an extremely vital job. We don't often see players resorting to using plastic in the modern game, although there are certain times, normally when either the lanes are very bad or basically they have no oil on them, where a player will resort to using a plastic ball as a strike shot. But obviously it's not preferable, and players would much rather go to urethane if reactive is not in play. So today we're going to look at times when PBA pros have actually been forced to use plastic balls as a strike shot. Enter the following tournament, the Plastic Ball Championship. This was a PBA event that ran from 2008 to 2011. There were 3 yearly editions of this tournament, and the premise was simple. Players could only use a plastic ball during the entire tournament, and this tournament essentially was a show of respect and recognition to all of the great PBA bowlers who only used plastic balls back in the day. And this tournament was actually specifically named after PBA legend Mark Roth. It was a great idea for a tournament as it really tested the players' skills, as they could not solely rely on the reactive balls to help them. In this video we're going to focus on the 2010 edition of the Plastic Ball Championship, and we start with Match 1. Match 1 features Mike Machuga, who is probably best known for his so-called Machuga flop, and you can see a clip right now of him doing the Machuga flop. Machuga is facing Wayne Garber, and if you haven't seen Garber bowl before, well, be warned, he probably has the most unorthodox style of all time. Machuga started off with a double and then went through the nose, leaving the 6-10. Now the players are playing on the shark oil pattern, which at the time was the longest pattern used on the PBA. This was actually a change from the previous year where they bowled on the cheetah pattern. The cheetah is the complete opposite of shark, as it's a very short pattern and is also typically very high scoring. It also made things a lot easier for the pros because they could still hook the ball on the cheetah pattern even with a plastic, whereas on shark there's so much oil that a plastic ball basically just won't hook, so you're going to see the players playing very straight and tight. Using a shark pattern for a plastic ball tournament certainly makes it much more of a challenge for the players. It doesn't take long for Wayne Garber to get lined up, and he starts stringing strikes together. He's playing a very direct line to the pocket with quite a bit more speed than Machuga. Machuga is struggling and keeps going through the nose. This is the issue with using plastic on this shark pattern. You can't miss right, but likewise if you come too far inside, it's going to pick up too much on the back end. But Garber just continues to strike and manages to strike to the second shot in the 10th frame for a very impressive 258 in Match 1. This means he advances to Match 2 to face up against the one and only Walter Ray Williams Jr. Now you have to say this sort of shot with a plastic ball just suits Walter's game. He's going to make the pocket all day long, it's just a question of whether he can carry with the plastic ball. He starts off with a strike and then a 10-pin which he spares. Garber is now starting to have issues with carry, and perhaps this is just the start of the lanes starting to break down ever so slightly. Walter's next 2 shots and he just makes it look so easy. As I mentioned, this is just his shot down to the ground, and he throws a double to take an early 12-pin lead. Garber then doubles after getting a nice break in the 5th frame, and Walter responded with 2 more strikes, and then Garber got into big trouble in the 6th frame, going through the nose and leaving the 6-7. Walter could not stop striking and went off the sheet for a 280 game. Garber played a pretty good game apart from 1 shot inside that left a split, but ultimately Walter was just too good, and a 280 game with a plastic ball is pretty insane. Walter moved on to Match 3 to take on Brian Zyzek, and this was actually Zyzek's first ever PBA TV finals appearance. However, if he had any first time nerves, they didn't show as he started with the front 5. Walter struck in the first 3 frames before leaving a 10-pin, but then struck again in the 5th. Zyzek then got pretty unlucky in the 6th frame, leaving the 7-10. It was a light hit, but still pretty unfortunate to leave both the 7 and 10-pin. Walter then struck to take a 3-pin lead, but on his next shot you can see it's just a little bit right of target, and obviously he's throwing plastic, so it just hits light and he leaves the 5-pin. With a reactive, he he probably would have carried this shot. Zizek then had a second extremely unfortunate break, leaving the 8-pin off a really great shot, but then bounced back with a strike in the 8th. Walter struck in the 8th to keep a 2-pin lead, but could not extend his lead further as he left the 10-pin. You can see on this shot the ball just did not hook and kept going straight. Now Zizek had an opportunity to win the match. He strikes in the 9th and now needs a strike and 7 in the 10th frame. Now just watch this shot coming up now. Straight off his hand you can tell it's right of target and the ball just doesn't come back, and yet somehow he trips out the 2-8. Perhaps this was a little bit of justice after the 7-10 and the solid 8-pin, but this break gave Zizek the win and he went onwards and upwards to the title match where he would take on the number 1 seed Jason Belmonte. This was still extremely early on in Belmonte's PBA career, as he'd only been on the tour for about a year and had just won 1 title at this point. Belmonte certainly had an advantage in this match by being a 2-hander, as it just gives him a little bit more margin for error using a plastic ball, as he's able to create so much speed and revs. It was another great start for Zizek, however, as he threw the front 4 before leaving a 10-pin in the 5th frame. Belmo had an opening double but then left back-to-back 10-pins. Both players were trading blows, but surprisingly it was actually Belmonte who was struggling with the carry and Zizek was getting a lot more pin action. Zizek left a 10-pin in the 8th and almost left another 7-10 in the 9th frame, but just managed to kick out the 7. Belmonte now had to step up and keep striking. If he struck out, he could max for a 247, which meant that Zizek would need to strike out for a tie. Belmo threw a strike in the 9th and then all 3 strikes in the 10th, which meant that he now could not lose. The situation was simple. Zizek had to have all 3 in the 10th frame to force a tie. He threw 2 fantastic shots under pressure and got the first 2 strikes. He must now strike once more to force a sudden death roll-off. And there we have it. We are heading to a roll-off to decide the title. This is a 1-ball sudden death roll-off, and as the 1 seed, Belmonte chose to go first and start on the left lane. On Belmonte's first shot, and you have to say he was very unfortunate leaving the 7-pin here. I mean, if I'm being extremely critical, it was ever so slightly high, but by the looks of it, even so, it was a very harsh leave. But this now means that Zizek can step up and take the title with a strike. As somebody's head got in the way of this shot, so we can't see the pin action, it looked like it might have been a bit of a light hit, but you can't really tell for sure. Either way, all 10 fell down and Brian Zizek was the winner. It was a fantastic performance from the rookie to take down both Walter and Belmonte. He bowled incredibly well in both matches and was a worthy winner, especially as he had to strike out to force the roll-off in the title match. And there we have it. That brings us to an end of this little analysis of the Mark Roth Plastic Ball Championship. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and who knows, maybe one day we'll start to see more plastic balls being used. Maybe plastic balls will be the new urethane in a few years' time. But one thing on my wish list is actually that the PBA will bring back the Plastic Ball Championship, because it was a fantastic tournament and I thought the 3 editions that they had were very successful, and I like that it adds a challenge to the players to just use the 1 ball and then it becomes more about skill. So I do hope that they bring this back at some point in the future. As always, if you have enjoyed this video but you've yet to subscribe, I'd really appreciate it if you could click the subscribe button below. Thank you, bowling fans, and see you all next time.